The first time I put my Amish clothes on after leaving was a year after I had left. I put them on and I thought I was going to suffocate. And then I started putting them on again from my videos and I just got immune to it. And now I don't have any emotions about putting my clothes on. I often look at my clothes and I'm like, just clothes. I don't have any feelings about them anymore, which in my opinion is very nice. I had a suitcase. I hauled the whole thing 4 miles and walked to our place, and he had a truck with a sleeper and he had kept it unlocked. And so I just went into the sleeper and slept in there. And they saw me and they were like, "Did you run away?" I was like, "Yep." They told mom and dad I was there. Mom and dad drove in with horse and buggy and tried to convince me to come back. They were there talking to me for 2 hours and I didn't say a single word. I was so stressed. To this day, there's only a couple things I remember about that. One is that, so every morning, Dad always got up and called out the names one by one and they would have to answer. So that morning when he woke up, I obviously didn't answer because I wasn't there. And so he told me that he wished that when I didn't answer, he was hoping that he would find me in bed dead rather than not there at all. He would rather that I was dead than have left the Amish.
Hello and welcome back to this channel. My name is Frida Bizel and I'm a YouTuber with a deep interest in closed subcultures, especially as I was raised and left the very conservative Satmar Hasidic Jewish society. Today, I will be talking to Lovina Zook, who is herself ex-Amish. Is it ex-Swartzentruber?
Yep.
Okay, great. Lavina creates fascinating videos about Amish cooking that brings you back to a simpler world, or so it seems to me anyway. Yet Lavina left it all behind. Today, I hope she will share a little bit with us so we can understand what life was like in the world she comes from and why she chose a different path. Lavina has a cookbook of Amish cooking, which I'll link in the video description. Hello, Lavina. How are you?
Hi, Frida. I'm very good.
So maybe let's place you a little bit in the timeline and in the map of the world. Where were you born and which year?
I was born in 2003 in southern Minnesota. My parents, I was born the second oldest. There's 13 of us now, but I was the second oldest. But when I was 10 years old, then we moved in Iowa, and that's where I grew up until I was 18. Right after I turned 18, so pretty much exactly 8 years after we had moved to Iowa, I left the Amish and moved back up to Minnesota. My older brother had left the Amish as well, and that's where he went when he left.
Let's talk a little bit about your childhood, actually. Can you talk about that? Like, what was it like to grow up? You didn't drive the buggy, right? Girls
Oh,
are
I
allowed to
did.
drive the buggy?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Girls, anybody, girls or boys are allowed to drive the buggy, and they usually start around the age of 7 or 8. I was first allowed to go somewhere by myself at the age of 8. I was first allowed to go to the neighbors with horse and buggy. So it depends who your parents are, how tame your horses are. We had a very wild horse when I started. I was very scared. It was dark one night and I was scared out of my mind. That horse was, I remember when they got him, he was a 2-year-old little colt. I was 4 years old. So he would have been born in 2005. So he would be 21 years old already. I don't know if they still
How
have
long do
him or not.
horses live?
In the Amish, they can live up to 30 years, but they usually aren't in the best of health by the time, any horse usually is in the best of health by the time they're 30 years old. So usually around the time a horse is like 21, 22, sometimes 25. Most of the Amish I grew up with try not to drive them once they're that old because it's not humane. It's just not nice to drive a horse when they're that old and that fragile. So usually once they're that old and they just literally can't live life good anymore, they're just in pain, they usually put them down, just humanely put them down, and they don't eat horse meat, so they don't butcher their horses. Horses and cats and dogs are the 3 animals on the whole farm that they would never butcher.
Did you have animals on the property that you ate that you felt sad about?
We only ever had one cow that I felt so sad because we butchered her. I felt so sad. It was a cow that I learned to milk with. I was 4 years old when I learned to milk. And she was such a gentle cow. She was a Jersey. So her udder was like low to the ground so I could reach it easy. I loved that cow so much. Her name was Chers. I milked her for years. When I was maybe 8 or so. She was too old to have calves. Like, probably having a calf would have probably killed her. So she couldn't produce milk anymore, so we butchered her. And that was the only cow. I didn't feel sad eating her because I didn't think about it, but I felt sad when they killed her. Like, I didn't watch because I couldn't stand watching it because I didn't want to be reminded that they're killing my favorite cow. But I feel like that's a big part of Amish kids growing up. Like, you have milk cows, you have chickens, like you're laying hens, you have pigs and stuff like that that you personally feed and like pet and get to know and all of that stuff. And then one day they're meat. Because if you're growing animals for food, which is what they do, you usually can't help but become attached to them if you're taking care of them. But the parents also can't afford to just keep on feeding all these animals and never eat any of them because that is what's keeping us fed. So I don't know, I feel like it's just a part of life. Like, it's human to feel sad, but then again, we need to live.
Yeah. And the animals raised in the conditions they were in your life are in much better conditions than the animals that I'm sure I eat all the time. It's just I don't have feelings because I don't know them.
I don't know. Our animals we tried to be whenever we had to butcher them, we did our very best to be very, like, as quick-witted as possible. So our animals were often tame enough, they would go right up to them and, like, pet them and make sure they're all calm. And then they would just, like, hold the gun up to the face or whatever, and just like that, the animal is dead. No struggle, no pain, no nothing. And all they've known their whole life is being taken care of and being fed and roaming the pastures. I don't know. The thought of how our animals, where we get our meat and eggs and stuff from nowadays, or even where the milk in the store comes from, it very much irks me to think about how those animals are raised, and I don't like it. And I think you can tell in the food quality how they're raised too, because an animal that is raised in stress and in not prime conditions does not produce good quality meat. I don't care how organic it is.
Is this something that you experience, or is this a common belief or perception among the Amish?
That's a very common thing among the Amish. They go deer hunting for meat. They eat a lot of venison, so they go deer hunting for meat a lot. But if they do kill a deer, you want to kill it instantly. Like, you don't want it to be, like, wounded and running for half a mile, because then the fear seeps into the meat and you can taste it.
Do the Amish drink caffeine?
Oh my gosh, do they ever. They drink so much coffee. My goodness, the Amish, and it's not your iced coffee, it is plain black hot coffee. They drink that stuff like it is life-saving. I remember I think I was 12 years old when I started drinking coffee. I had migraine headaches from the time I was 4 years old. And so by the time I was 12 years old, mom's like, okay, you can drink coffee because coffee helps with migraine headaches. And so I did. I usually drank a cup a day to help with my headache because I got headaches daily. It was bad. We never got to the bottom of it. After I left the Amish, they vanished, and I can't remember the last time I had a headache. Kind of wild, but I remember so specifically when they first started. I was 4 years old or so, and I was getting headaches to the point where I would get dizzy and I couldn't even walk. It was bad, and I was a little girl. And our Amish neighbor, right up the hill, he did chiropractic treatments. It cost $12 for a 15-minute treatment. It was amazing. I would love to have a treatment for him again, but I specifically remember I was 4 years old. It was a winter night, cold, dark, and it, of course, got dark early. Mom and Dad loaded all of us kids onto a couple toboggans. I was one of the oldest ones, so I had to sit in the back and hold a couple of my baby siblings in front of me, and then my oldest brother was on the other toboggan holding a couple more, and they pulled us across the pasture just up the hill to the neighbors, and it was cold and dark and bumpy. It was no fun, but we got there. I had a splitting headache, and he gave me a treatment. The headache went away. I often wonder too if a lot of those headaches weren't dehydration headaches, because it isn't very common among the Amish for them to drink a lot of water. They're not like influenced to drink a lot of water. They know drinking water is healthy and you need to drink water, but they don't make it a point in their life to drink water, especially not for their kids. So I often wonder if it might have been maybe just stress combined with dehydration. I guess we'll never know because I don't get them anymore and I don't wish to get them ever again. But he
Yeah.
gave me a treatment. My headache went away. We went back. I fell asleep on the toboggan ride on the way home.
The whole family went because of your headache?
Yeah, he gave me a 15-minute treatment, and then we would stay there and visit for a couple of hours because that's very common for the Amish to just go to someone's house unannounced and stay there for a couple of hours to just visit. And especially during the winter when it gets dark so early. But yes, they bundled me up, took me up there unannounced, and I had an appointment to go to a treatment like that for it was once a month until I was 18 years old, and it's still the one thing in my Amish life that I genuinely wish I could go back to.
When you recount these memories, what feelings do you have?
Some of them are very sad for some of them. As far as like the milking cow, like the church, the one that we butchered, I have so many fond memories of that cow. And I get sad when I think about the day that we actually butchered it. But I'm also happy because like she fed us. She lived a good life. She was gentle, kind. She loved us little kids, and she knew no pain in her death. A lot of the memories are like, now looking back at it with an adult perspective, sometimes it makes me a little bit sad because sometimes this is something that always makes me sad, and I always think it did not happen the way I would want to treat my kids. So you know how snow always slides off a roof when it gets heavy and then it slides off the roof? Well, that happened a lot growing up because we had steep roofs and big roofs and a lot of snow. So my mom, from a very young age, told us that you never want to get caught in there because it could kill you. Like, it could kill a person if that falls on a person. And I was 3 or 4 years old, and I was in my dad's mock boots. Like, he had mock boots, and the neighbors were down at our house to butcher. That often happened. Like, we would all pitch in and help each other butcher a cow. So the neighbors were down there, and I was in my dad's mock boots, so they came like up to the top of my legs almost. Like, I couldn't run. I could barely walk in them. And it was snowy outside, sunny. It had snowed quite a bit the day before. And it was warm enough that the water was starting to drip off the roof. And I was outside right in front of the house with the neighbors' little kids and stuff. Like, they were a little bit further back than me. And all of a sudden I heard this rumbling start. And I was like, oh my gosh. I panicked because I knew the snow was coming down and it was gonna land on me. And I thought I was gonna die because I couldn't run. I had these big clopping boots on, and so I was caught under the snow. In the like, thinking about that, I'm like, it would have been funny if mom had not instilled a serious fear in me that it's going to kill me, and it would have been fine still. But when it happened, all the adults ran to the door to watch this happen, to watch this snow come barreling down on me. They didn't do a thing about it. And I was just standing there helpless, seeing them at the door, and they were all laughing at me. They were laughing their heads off that I was just standing there and I couldn't run because I had these big boots on. And I'm like, I think back to that and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I get it. It probably looked funny because I had big boots on, but still, mom spent so much time drilling this fear into us. And then when it actually happens, she just stands aside and laughs. And I don't know, as a little kid, that broke my heart. And I often think back to the little kid version of me, and I'm like, it was fair. My heart was fair to be broken. That was, and I feel sad for the little kid. I do laugh at how it must have looked to the adults, but still, I'm like, I would try to be, once me and my husband have kids, I want so hard to try and be a little bit more empathetic to my kids, like show a little bit more empathy to their emotions, because I feel like a lot of Amish parents, they're not taught to have empathy. A lot of Amish parents just, they laugh at their kids. Like, they don't show empathy, just they laugh at their kids, and it makes them tough. It doesn't, in my opinion. It breaks their little hearts, and it's not good for a little kid, I don't think. I don't know, I feel like it would be healthy for a parent to have a little bit more feelings about their kids' emotions. Yeah. So if I'm ever a mom, I really want to try and learn from
Yeah.
my childhood.
I think
So,
it's like old-fashioned views about the
mhm.
parent-child relationship versus how we see it in modern
It's
society.
very old fashioned. It's like you can't have emotions. That makes someone weak. That kind of
Yeah.
gets my goat when someone says that. I'm like, you are ruining the world with your words.
Did you have a deep emotional connection with anyone?
Not growing up Amish, I didn't know. I do now. I do. It took me several years after leaving the Amish to get there, but growing up Amish, I did not have deep emotional connections. I feel like those are kind of laughed at, like you don't have emotional connections with people, and I didn't. That's for sure. Like I did not have anybody that I would like trust to tell them my feelings. I barely trusted myself with my feelings and my emotions, so that's very valid that I wouldn't trust anybody else with it, because the general reaction to emotions and feelings in the Amish is laughter. You get made fun of, you get spread all over the community, because if you tell one person, you get like they are not afraid to spread it all over, and you openly get laughed at for it. So I never had that, no.
What was your relationship like to your parents?
Very awkward. I often say so a relationship is anytime I would say I didn't have a relationship with them, but I did because they were my parents. The relationship was just not good. It was like, we didn't like fight or anything. Amish kids don't fight with their parents. The parents just rule over them. So my parents, I distinctly remember the day, like I left the Amish during the night. So the day that I was planning on leaving the Amish at night, it was a Monday. Me and my mom had to, our closest town was about 7 miles away, and it was the town where we always went there. It was just a tiny town. It was a feed mill. So we always went there to buy the feed for our chickens. So we had to go to town and get chicken feed, and it was very rare that I got to go along because I was the second oldest one, so I often stayed at home to watch over the household while mom went with some of the younger siblings. But that day I got to go along, and it's very awkward. It's so awkward. Like, it was just me and mom. And you don't strike conversations. You don't talk to each other. Even to this day, if I get to see my mom, it's very rare anymore that happens because I can't visit or anything, but if I get to see my mom, it is very tense and awkward to try and carry on a conversation because they just don't do that with their kids. They don't have conversations with their kids. They control their kids, and that is about it. So anytime we were alone with our parents, it was just like an awkward silence. It's not at all a relationship I would want to have with my kids, and I can't imagine how you must raise your kids in order to have that. But yeah, it's very sad in my opinion,
Yeah,
the
it's so
relationships
sad.
most Amish kids have with their parents, and I would never want that ever in my
Yeah.
life for my kids.
I get it. So, you want to talk a little bit about why you decided to leave?
Yes. My whole life I dreamed of I was gonna be Amish, I was gonna have a couple dozen kids, and I was gonna
Sorry, I'm going to
be
interrupt you. Did you have Rumspringa?
No, we were not allowed to have that in my
You didn't
community.
have Rumspringa at all.
We were, well, they're allowed, they do like the youth group where once you're 16 and a half, you join this youth group 16 and a half up until you're married. And the youth group is where you meet, like the girls meet the boys, boys meet the girls, and they get to talk, and then they do the whole dating thing, and that's when they join church and everything. But we weren't allowed to do Rumspringa, where we would go out and do whatever we want to. I didn't know what that was until after I left the Amish. I know a lot of communities do, but we were not allowed to. But my whole life I planned on staying Amish, having a lot of kids, owning a bakery someday, everything. And I didn't think I would ever leave the Amish. I thought leaving the Amish was the worst thing you could ever do in your life because that's what I was taught. And then when I was 18, I had been teaching school for 3 years. I had just broken up with my boyfriend of 10 months, my Amish boyfriend of 10 months. We broke up in March. It was me
Why?
that broke it off. I didn't like him in the least. I was mainly, the only reason we started dating was because I was afraid to say no, because I was afraid I would get laughed at for saying no, because so often that happens in the Amish community. So I said yes, just to go along with them and not cause any disruption. And then I finally got the courage up to break it off with him. We broke up towards the end of March, and then my school term ended at, I think it was April 12 or so. I had just turned, my birthday is the 10th. I had just turned 18. And Dad so nicely told me that I will not be going back to school teaching the next term because I'm not getting paid enough. I was getting paid $12 a day. I agree, that's not enough. But I loved school teaching. That was my whole life. And I had just turned 18, so they expected me to join the church. So you get baptized in my community, always get baptized at the end of September. And you start joining the church at the end of May or beginning of June, usually at the end of May. So they were expecting me to join church. To join church, you have to go through like classes at church every 2 weeks from the end of May to the end of September. And once you start those classes, you're basically a church member and you can't leave anymore without getting shunned or whatever. So I didn't want to even get close to starting that, but all the other kids my age were joining church and they expected me to join as well. I didn't want to join church because I was scared. I knew once I joined church, I wouldn't have, I couldn't do, there were so many things I couldn't do. I could not follow any of my dreams of owning a bakery and stuff like that. So I had just broken up with my boyfriend. I had just finished school teaching. Dad said I couldn't go back and he wanted me to go work on his sawmill, which is a lot of hard labor. I don't mind that part. It is just very dirty and I don't think it's work for an Amish girl in a dress. And I didn't want to do that. I just didn't want to do that. But I didn't have a choice because it was Dad telling me I had to. So then they also wanted me to join church. And I was like, okay, this is all piling up. I'm getting a little panicky. And then one day, Mom, right after school ended, Mom told me that something about my cape. Like they wear a cape. I don't have one on right now, but they wear a cape and then they put like a band around their neck and they pin it in the front or tie it in the front and tuck their cape in there. And my whole life had been using a white band for my neck and just pin it. And one day Mom came up to me and she was like, if you join church, you can't do that anymore. You're going to have to use a small band and tie it instead. And I hated the small bands. I absolutely hated them. And
Why?
because they feel so much more choky. Like imagine having a piece of yarn tied around your neck versus having a loose 1-inch band around your neck. And I could not stand those things. And I just snapped. I was like, I can't do this. I cannot do that for the rest of my life. I can't have such a small tie around my neck with a cape stuffed in. I'm not going to do that for the rest of my life. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to leave the Amish, or I'm going to try to leave the Amish. And even up to that point, I was like, leaving the Amish is still the worst thing you can do. You're going to hell. It's so bad. You shouldn't do it. But I was like, it is the only option I have other than committing suicide to get out of these things. Like, it is the only option I have. That's like, okay, I'll leave the Amish and maybe then I'll just come back and they'll be a little bit more lenient with rules. Like maybe they'll be like, well, you can do that if you stay Amish. So that's kind of how I was thinking about it. And so I left. And even the night I left, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing you've ever done. You're going to hell. Like I kept diaries over that time and my diary entry is to this day scary to read. It was, it wasn't funny. So I left and I went through like 2 months. I didn't really have.
Where did you go?
I walked 4 miles.
To Minnesota?
No, so we lived in Iowa, so I walked 4 miles. The people who bought our place in Missouri, when we moved from Missouri to Iowa, like we moved 4 miles north, put us in Iowa, the people who bought the place that we used to live on were not Amish. And we knew them really well because they hauled logs for the sawmill where Dad worked at. So we knew them really well. And I just walked to their place. Like I had a suitcase, I hauled the whole thing 4 miles south and walked to their place, and he had a semi truck with a sleeper and he had kept it unlocked. And so I just went into the sleeper and slept in there. It had snow. It was April and it had snow, and I just slept in there for the rest of the night. The next morning I got up and I went into the shed part of the shop because they were still living in that shop building. And they came out the back door and they saw me and they were like, did you run away? I was like, yep. And they're like, okay, come in. And they helped me. They told Mom that I was there. So
How
Mom
they called her?
Nope, they went to their place and stopped in and told them. Mom and Dad drove in with horse and buggy that afternoon and tried to convince me to come back. They were there talking to me for 2 hours. And I didn't say a single word. I nodded my head, I shrugged, and I shook my head. That is all I did for those 2 hours. I was so stressed that to this day, there's only a couple things I remember about that conversation. One is that Dad told me so every morning when you get up, Dad always got up. They slept on the main floor and all the kids slept upstairs. So Dad would get up, open the door that led upstairs, and call out the names one by one, and they would have to answer, and he'd be like, it's time to get up. So that morning when he woke up, I obviously didn't answer because I wasn't there. And so that afternoon when they came to talk to me, he told me that he wished that when I didn't answer, he was hoping that he would find me in bed dead rather than not there at all, because he would rather that I was dead than have left the Amish. That's how they look at it. That's how my parents look at it. And that's what they drill into you as a kid. So it's not a light thing at all to leave the Amish. That was one thing I remember from, thank you. I think I've worked through it. It still brings up feelings, but I think it will for the rest of my life. That's the one thing I remember from that conversation. The other thing I remember is that, like, about an hour and a half into the conversation, Mom was again trying to convince me to come back with them. And she was like, they won't tell anybody that I'm back right away, because when you leave the Amish, people come visiting. Like, they would come visiting my parents because it was like someone had died. Everybody wore solid black. They would come visiting, and it was hushed and quiet and such a sad atmosphere. So I knew that night a bunch of people would be at Mom and Dad's place to visit them because I had left the Amish. And Mom was like, you can come back with us. Like, there will be people there, but you can just stay upstairs and we won't tell them that you came back. And then we'll take you to this mental institution and we'll get you help, so you don't feel like you have to leave the Amish. Like, basically saying you're mentally ill. If you come back, we'll take you to an institution that brainwashes you into staying Amish, because they do that with quite a few of their young people. Like, say their young people think they can't live the Amish life anymore, off to the mental institution you go. And usually they're successful in blackwashing or brainwashing them to stay there. And it happened to a couple of my cousins, and they thought they could successfully do it for me. I was like, Mom was like, you don't want to do that? And I was like, so I remember that. Those are two very distinctive things that I remember. But other than that, there is very, very little I remember from that conversation. Like, it was just 2 hours of straight blabber that I kind of blacked out for it. I mean, it was very strange. But then,
what are your feelings to your parents now about it?
About that, I mean, I get where they were coming from. And I still get where they're coming from. That is how they were taught to live. But it gets to a point. They have a lot of siblings and uncles that have left the Amish. A lot. And they have a lot of siblings and uncles that have tried so hard and so often to tell them, give them our perspective and tell them why we do this. And they refuse to listen. They refuse to believe that anybody but them is right. So we are always the villain. So in my opinion now, I'm like, it's them. You can't even say that's the way they were raised, because they have had the opportunity to learn different. They've had the opportunity to change and to look at the world different. They choose not to. So I'm like, it's on them. Like, I have to forgive them every time I think of them. I try so hard to forgive them for what they did, because it doesn't do my life any good to hold grudges against them and to just get mad at them. But I can still have very heated feelings about them, and I have countless conversations in my head with them where things go this way or that way. But I often just have to be like, forget it. It's never gonna happen. They will not ever believe you because you make a good argument. The only way they will ever believe you is if there's a divine intervention, because they will not come to their senses because I have a good argument. So I look at them as they're my parents, and they are not going to love me. They don't know how to love me like the way parents are called to love their kids. They don't know how. So they're not going to. And I can't really do anything about it except pray for them, which I do a lot. And I pray for myself too, because it goes very hard to just forgive someone that refuses to listen to your side of the story when they're your parents. So I don't know. I try my best to just not let myself get into a thought battle about them. So
I like the word thought battle. That's a great word.
Yeah, because I don't know. If I think about my parents when I do think about them, it is often with sadness. And
You don't see them at all?
I saw them in December for about 5 minutes. I saw them by accident and we didn't talk at all. So
Why did you see them?
I was at my Amish sister, so my younger Amish sister, she is married now and she's Amish, and her husband are not nearly as strict as my parents, so they let us visit. My parents don't let us visit at all, and they won't visit us. But my sister and her husband let us visit. So I was there visiting, me and my sister-in-law were there visiting, and my parents showed up and we can't visit them or anything, so we left. And we didn't get to talk to them or anything, and things are very rocky when it comes to our parents. It's best, in my opinion, it's best left alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I pray about it and everything. Contact with them usually doesn't turn out good.
You never joined the church, so technically you're not shunned, right?
I'm not, no. Technically, I'm not shunned. They just personally decided to shun me. So, yeah, it's often when I think about them, it is with sadness if I allow myself to think about them that deeply. And then sometimes it's anger. Like sometimes I have bursts of resentment, but then I try to get over it again because it never does any good in my life to hate them for the things they did.
Emotions are normal, you know?
Yes, they are.
That's one of the luxuries that you have now.
My goodness, that is a luxury. I wish people knew how much of a luxury emotions are. That's one thing. When I left the Amish, I didn't go back to visit them for... When I first left the Amish, we were allowed to go back to visit them, me and my older brother, because my older brother had left also. We were allowed to go back to visit the family. So 15 months after I left, I went back to visit. And I was happy. By that time, I was happy. I was doing good in life. I was finding out who I was as a person. I loved my life. I was very happy. And so I was just myself. I showed my happiness. I laughed a lot. I talked a lot when I was there. And that is not how I acted when I was Amish. When I was Amish, I was usually afraid to laugh or smile, and I didn't talk much because talking got you laughed at. Talking made you look ridiculous a lot of times. And so when I left, I was happier. And then when I went back to visit, I showed those happy emotions. I was happy and everything. And then my older brother went back to visit too. And if there's one thing Amish love to do, it is talk about other people
behind
their back. So they told my brother, they got to talking about me, and they told my brother that when I was there, I acted like I was on drugs.
Oh no.
I acted like I was high. And he told me, and I was like, okay, punch to the gut. Okay. It's like, and so I look at that and I'm like, they have no clue who I even am. They don't know who I am. They knew who I was when I was Amish. They recognize my body or my build. Like they recognize my face, but they have no idea who my personality is. Not even an inkling of a clue who my personality is. Because they don't want to get to know me. They just want to know the person that I was before I left the Amish. And I will never be that person again. So that's what I meant when I say they can't love me, because they don't know who I am. And it happens with that a lot with Amish kids, and a lot of, or with ex-Amish kids. A lot of kids who leave the Amish try to run away from their life. Like they don't want to face up to their past and heal themselves. They often try to just get away from it all and forget it and never talk about it again. And that, in my opinion, is the worst thing you could do, is try to hide from it. Because it is always there. It will always affect your life if you don't face up to it. And I personally know ex-Amish people who do that, who are like, Amish, like, don't touch them, they're the worst people ever, and then they refuse to talk about their past, they refuse to heal and become better people, and then oftentimes when they go back to visit the Amish, they act a lot like the people they were when they were Amish, and they don't actually let their real personality come out. So, I don't know, for those people, I often feel really sad, because I'm like, oh, if you would just face up to it and heal from it, you would have so much better of a life and a personality, and you could actually live a good life versus always trying to run from it. So
yeah, I get it.
It's
actually, on that note, you wear the Amish clothing when you do your videos, which I love. How do you feel about it? How do you feel putting it on?
I have no emotions whatsoever about putting it on, but The first time I put my Amish clothes on after leaving was a year after I had left. It was exactly a year after I had left. I put them on and I thought I was going to suffocate. I almost panicked. Like, it was not funny for me. And then 15 months after I left, no, that was more than 15 months. That was 3 years after I left. Me and my sister-in-law had stopped in at my parents' place to visit. That was one of the last times we were allowed to visit. We had stopped in to visit, and the siblings got me to change into one of my Amish outfits while I was there. So I was back at home in my old bedroom in my Amish clothes. The PTSD was strong. I was not okay. I was so not okay. But I took them off, went home, and then I moved to was here in Texas, and then I started putting them on again and from my videos, and I just kind of got immune to it. And now I don't have any emotions about putting my clothes on. I often look at my clothes and I'm like, they're just clothes. I don't have any feelings about them anymore, which in my opinion is very nice. And I'm happy about that. I'm very happy that I can put any clothes on I want and not have feelings about them. Now, actually going back and like visiting the Amish and seeing how they live and how they treat each other, that still gives me like flashbacks. I cannot be in that environment for more than a couple hours, or I get very like antsy. Like I get very anxious and I have to get out of there again. Like, I try not to be like, say we go back to visit my Amish sister, I try not to be around there for too long because it makes me like very jittery, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, in my experience, the thing about these things is they're so loaded for us. And then if you expose yourself enough to it, it can become a new thing and it can become something you're comfortable with. From my view, watching your videos, I love that you're comfortable in the clothing that you were raised in, because you take back something that was yours and it can become something that...
And I made it something else, yes.
Exactly. To me, I think that's very healing.
Yes, I feel like, and I wish I could do that with my family. I wish I could do that with my childhood home. Like, say I drive in the driveway there. I wish I could do that, but right now I can't because my parents are there and they won't allow that to happen while I'm there. Like, they are still the same people. I can change. I can view them differently, but they still act the exact same way they did when I was a kid. And I can react way differently, but it's still all the same. Like, their actions, everything is still all the same. Doesn't matter how I react. So
you don't know what's in the future yet.
That is what my uncle often says. He left the Amish, and Grandma, his mom, left the Amish as well. And his parents became very welcoming of their lifestyle. My dad's parents, which is still to this day very baffling to me, because the Amish live by honor your parents or obey your parents to your last dying breath. And my dad's mom left the Amish. My dad's dad accepted his ex-Amish kids and accepted us. But for some reason, that does not click with Dad. He thinks that's wrong. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm so touched by so much you've shared. I just want to ask how you met your husband.
I left. Yes, he's also ex-Amish. I left in April of 2021, and he left in August of 2021. 4 months later, and we met. When he left, I was dating someone that grew up in the same community he did, and so my boyfriend at the time went and picked him up when he left the Amish, brought him back to where we were living, and he became our roommate, me and my boyfriend's roommate. And then a couple years later, I broke up with my boyfriend and moved to Texas, and my now husband, who was our roommate up until then, right before we broke up, he moved to New York for work. So we still kept in touch, but we were friends. Have a lot of the same personality, so we talked a lot when we were roommates. We talked a lot, and we got to know each other really well because we were roommates and stuff. And then we both lived that far apart, and we still kept in touch just because we were friends and stuff. And then our kept in touch turned into FaceTiming. Every Saturday evening we would FaceTime each other, and then it turned into more like every day. And in April, half a year after I had broken up with my boyfriend, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and we started dating, and that August we got married. So we got married in August of 2024. So we got married exactly 3 years after my husband left the Amish, and 3 years and 4 months after I left the Amish. And we've been living in Texas ever since.
Sweet. And now you're gonna have chickens and
yes,
cows or whatever. Steers? What's the word you use?
Yeah, steer for butchering for our beef.
For your beef. It's very sweet. It's very sweet. Does your family, you think, back home know that you're a celebrity?
They know I make videos, but I don't think they realize. They don't know what celebrities are. And
wow.
I don't think they realize the extent of it. They can't realize the extent of it because it wouldn't like register in their brain. They don't, if they see my videos, they don't say I put a video on TikTok. They say I put a show on TikTok. Like whenever I put a show on TikTok.
Oh, that's funny. You know, I see some similarities and some not between the world that I come from and your community, but something about being a content creator who's ex-Hasidic is Hasidic people are very vocal. Like I get a lot of comments from them. So whenever I make content, I can already hear in the back of my head as they're coming to say their things. So, do you hear from Amish people?
Not Amish people, no. Now, sometimes, I know when I first started creating Amish content, a lot of Amish don't have phones, so you never hear from them. But ex-Amish they tend to be very boisterous and very defensive. I feel like a lot of ex-Amish get offended so easily when it comes to stuff about the Amish. Like all Amish are different. It varies so much from community to community with the rules and stuff. So a lot of times, say I would get online and I would say, Amish can't do this, and I wouldn't specify Swartzentruber Amish or my community Amish. There would be an ex-Amish person from a different community being like, you don't know what you're talking about, do that. And they're so defensive of their lifestyle. Like I don't know why so many of them act like we were not all different. So I feel like that's something I've learned with content creation. Always specify my community, because otherwise you will have offended ex-Amish people in the comments trying to discredit you. And you will also have a lot of non-Amish people who just live close by the Amish trying to discredit you and be like, you're so fake, you don't know what you're talking about. And I always just like, all right.
Yeah. Lina, you're very wise. I love how sensible you are. It's a breath of fresh air. Thank you so much. I'm not going to keep you any longer. I took 2 hours of your time. Thank you so much. I'm going to link to all of your socials in the video description. Anything else I missed?
No, I don't think so. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, me too. I could talk to you all day. To be honest, I love oral histories, and I feel like you're very forthcoming.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lavina. I'm going to be linking your socials in the video description, and thank you to the viewers and the podcast listeners as well. Bye-bye.